All of us are products of Title IX. The people that have forged a path for us, they were brave, they were tough.
We don't want more than anyone else. We don't want anything different than anyone else. We just want the same. And so many people had to go through an awful lot to get that. So
Without Title IX, women wouldn't have even been in the game. Probably one of the most important pieces of legislation of the 20th century.
I wouldn't have had a career without Title IX. I think first and foremost, I wouldn't have been able to, play soccer or any sport that I liked in high school.
Opportunity to succeed, and most importantly, to become the best people that they can be.
Title IX, only 37 words, but it packs a punch. In order to understand this law, it is important for us to ask why this law was needed in the first place. In the early 1900s, very few women attended college. Women were expected to be homemakers. If they did attend college, they were denied access to certain subjects such as engineering, business, law, or medicine. Women were discriminated against and denied many educational rights. They were also discouraged from exercising or playing sports. Many people in the early 1900s felt women were weaker than men. They believed that exercising could lead to bodily harm and even result in the higher rate of infertility. So physical education for women consisted of activities that were less active, like posture improving exercises. Being competitive was considered unladylike. So sports, like cheerleading and square dancing, were some of the only activities that were encouraged. During World War II, many women entered the workforce to do their part in the war effort. They had to take on jobs that not only men had done in the past, but after the war, women were often expected to go back to what they were doing, staying home as wives and mothers. Many women discovered that they enjoyed working and wanted to continue to have these freedoms. So, even after the war, women were left with very few job opportunities. A woman who wanted a career could choose to be a secretary, librarian, teacher, or nurse. In college, the majority were still men, and those ladies that went to college, it was assumed by many they were there to get a better husband. The 1960s was a tumultuous time in American history. People's rights and ideas were being reevaluated, and the passing of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 helped to energize the movements behind women's rights as well. In 1967, President Lyndon Johnson wanted to make clarifications to the Civil Rights Act of 1964. It was at this time that the National Organization for Women convinced him to make an amendment and include women in the Civil Rights Act. This law had applied more directly to women in the workplace of federally financed organizations. Equality in education would come later. The leaders of this movement were Edith Green and Bernice Sanders. They participated in congressional hearings where women's rights were being discussed. It was here that Title IX was proposed. After that, Patsy Mink and Edith Green authored Title IX in its infant stages. On February 27, 1972, Senator Birch Bayh of Indiana introduced the Title IX legislation to Congress as an amendment to the reauthorization of the Higher Education Act of 1965. On June 23, 1972, Richard Nixon signed this education amendment into law, leading to equalizing education in the United States and preventing sexual discrimination in educational institutions. This law became better known as Title IX. Although sports were not specifically mentioned in Title IX, it would permanently alter the course of women's athletics, providing more equality. What does that mean, to be equal? Equality would be judged under two things: participation in sports and the treatment of women. So schools needed to look at the percentage of girls in school and make sure they received the same amount of funding. So if there were 51% of the student population that were girls, then 51% of the athletic funds needed to go to them. Schools also needed to increase the number of sports they had. If the boys had 5 sports to choose from, then the girls required the same number. This law also ensured that there were not just equal in quantity, but equal in quality as well. So that meant quality equipment, uniforms, coaches, locker rooms, medical services, practice, and game times. All needed to be equal in quantity and quality. Institutions that were receiving federal money were given until July of 1978 to comply. Before Title IX, only 15% of college athletes were women, and in high school it was only 7%. That meant that in 1970, only 240,000 high school girls played sports. But by 1978, 1,600,000 girls played high school sports. Before this law, it was extremely rare for a woman to be offered a scholarship. For example, the Olympic swimmer Deana Therio in the 1964 Olympics won a gold medal and later sought a college scholarship but never received one. Only about 2% of college athletic budget went to funding their women's programs, and 50 women per year received college scholarships in 1970. But by 1978, that number rose to 10,000 scholarships given to women. It is easy to see that Title IX's most visible effect has been in athletics. Many people, however, are surprised to learn the law does so much more. The law also provides a safe and accessible learning environment for both sexes, guaranteeing pregnant and parenting students equal educational opportunities, and requires that courses in career counseling not be limited by gender. Today, thanks to Title IX, more female students are not only playing sports, but it is also credited with decreasing dropout rate of girls from high school and increasing the number of women who pursue higher education and complete college degrees. Women also enrolling in math and science classes in record numbers. Today, more than half of all medical and law students are women. These changes did not happen right away. It was slow going and often met with opposition. One such obstacle that had to be overcome came from the college football teams. Football has always generated a lot of money. In America, football is the king of sports from grade school to college and brings in money for universities and TV networks. In 1974, Senator John Tower of Texas introduced an amendment that would exempt revenue-producing sports from having to comply to Title IX. The top college football coaches went to Washington, D.C. to testify in favor of this Tower Amendment. It would protect football from having to give up some of its scholarship money to women's sports. It was even supported by the NCAA and the Big Ten Conference. But even with this powerful support, it failed. Other critics of Title IX have pointed out that while it has helped female athletes, schools have been forced to cancel smaller men's programs to abide by this law. Often sports like men's wrestling, gymnastics, men's volleyball, diving, fencing. In 2011, the University of Delaware's men's track team filed a discrimination complaint after they reduced the track program to club status. It is believed that these schools are cutting minor sports like men's track in the name of Title IX to focus on more popular sports such as football and basketball. One of the biggest challenges facing Title IX's future lies in ensuring proper enforcement necessary to make sure schools follow the rules. The law requires every school in the country to name a Title IX coordinator, yet the job is frequently given to staff members who lack either the training or the authority to enforce the law. Another issue is that students can face huge hurdles when proving Title IX complaints. For example, a child who is sexually harassed by a teacher must meet a higher standard of proof than an adult making a similar claim against an employer. Title IX's biggest ally may turn out to be educators who really care about how this affects their students in schools. Teachers are better equipped than students to compare the school procedures against the law's requirements. But despite all of these problems that have come along with Title IX, those 37 words have impacted today's culture more than any other women's legislature, from the legendary tennis player Billie Jean King to multiple gold medal winner Misty May and the millions of women in between in one way or another. Title IX has had a positive impact and has given so many opportunities for so many women.